Hi, my name's Justin Shelf and I run our engineering team here at PatchMyPC. In this video, we're going to be talking about some changes starting with Java 8 Update to 11, where it will no longer automatically uninstall previous versions of the runtime by default. The reason for this change is that Java now requires us to use an offline download where you need to manually download and provide the path for the Java Runtime installer. This is due to their licensing changes that were introduced where it's now a paid product for business. So in order to do that, you need to essentially download the installer and configure it using the local content path within our publishing service under the advanced tab so we know where to look for that installer. Now we have a completely separate guide that we'll include in the description if you're not familiar with how to use this. But as a result of this, we can no longer perform the amount of customization on the fly that we could before when we were downloading the update. So in order to now uninstall previous versions, we need to use what's called a custom pre-action script that's built into our publishing service. Now this feature will only be available in our publishing service. It's not available in the in-console integration with 1806 or newer of Config Manager. So keep that in mind. If you want to use the option to uninstall it, you will need to be publishing at least the Java updates using our publishing service. So we can see that I right-clicked on Java 8 32-bit. We're then going to click on Add a Custom Pre-Update Script and then choose Browse. From the Browse window, we need to browse out to where you can download the PowerShell script that we'll provide within the blog post as a template. So we basically have two scripts here. We have a script that will automatically uninstall all versions of Java Runtime for the 32 or 64-bit of version 8. So I'm going to go ahead and browse out to that path. And then we're going to choose the 32-bit version. You need to ensure that the script that you're adding matches the architecture of the Java 8 product that you select. I'm also going to select that I don't want to attempt the update in the event that the script returns a bad exit code and could not uninstall previous versions. We then choose OK, and we can now see that we have Java 8 and we have the pre-script enabled. It's important that we add these as a pre-script because this will automatically uninstall all versions of that Java 8 runtime. So if you add it as a post-action script, what would happen is it would also uninstall the update that was just installed. So you want to make sure that you use a pre-update script for both the 64 and the 32-bit PowerShell script within these products. We then choose OK and then Apply. From here, I'm going to go ahead and run the sync so I can show you what this process is going to look like. All right, so within the patchmypc.log, as well as our automated email report, we can see that both of those updates were published successfully. Now, in the event that you had already had a version of Java 8 runtime published that did not have the script and you wanted to convert to the option where you can uninstall it, all you would have to do in that scenario is choose the option that you want to republish the update. What that will do is that will republish the update as a new update, and then it will then include the script within that newly republished updates. And any republished update will also append the date that it was republished within the title, so you know that it is in fact the new update when you view that update within SCCM. All right, so looking at our console, we can see that both of these updates were published, and we also have an ADR set that has also automatically deployed these updates. So to show you the way that the uninstallation will occur on the client, if we jump over to a client, we can see that we have a device that has both the outdated version of Java 8 32-bit as well as the 64-bit installation. So if we go ahead and look at the update, we're going to go ahead and click that for the 32-bit, and we're going to click on install. Now within the CCM logs folder, since we enabled some custom actions such as the pre-script that's going to run the PowerShell script, we're going to create a new log file called patchmypc script runner. Now, this is going to show us all the actions that are occurring when we install these third-party updates. So what we can see is that during the update, we did in fact run the pre-update script that removes Java 8 for any version of the 32-bit. So we can now see that the PowerShell script completed and now the update actually completed. So what's going to happen is it would have uninstalled the version of Java 8 update 161 prior to installing the latest update. So if we do a refresh, we can in fact see that we now have Java 8 update to 11 only. So that looks like it was a good upgrade. Now, if we go ahead and look at the Windows temp folder, the uninstall process will also be logged out in the patchmypc-remove JRE8. This is going to be the same name as the actual PowerShell script. So this is where we're actually see us searching for any previous builds of Java 8 32-bit, and you can see the uninstall take place in this log file as well. So that looks good. Now we'll repeat the process, and let's go ahead and update the 64-bit version of Java Runtime. If we look back at that patchmypc script runner log, we should see a similar process here, but rather than running the 32-bit PowerShell script, we're going to run the 64-bit. So if we go back to the C Windows temp log, we should now see that we also have the uninstall for 64-bit. So in this case, we can in fact see that it did detect that we had the 64-bit version of JRE. And we can now see that we're just waiting for the latest version to complete the installation. Okay, so now the update completed, and we can see that those pre-action PowerShell scripts did in fact cleanly remove the older versions prior to doing the latest version install. So you can in fact see that we're only left with the latest versions as expected. Now the second option I'm going to talk about is there is a custom command line that we can add to Java's installer called remove older JREs. Now this could potentially have some issues in the scenario that you run both the 32 and the 64-bit version on the same devices for Java Runtime, and we'll review what I mean. All right, so we're back on our server and we reverted it back to a clean state where we have no versions published. So the second option is that we can right-click the update and you can add a custom command line. Now, the command line that we can add here is remove older JREs equal 1. Now, this is a command line that will append automatically to Java's installer, and that will tell Java to automatically remove any previous versions. Now, there is a scenario where this could cause issues for you. Now, in the event that you're using both the 32 and the 64-bit of Java Runtime within the same devices, this can cause the uninstall to remove both the 32 and the 64-bit version at the same time during one individual update. So what this scenario can cause is if, let's say, for example, you have a 64-bit OS, you have 32 and 64-bit Java 8 runtime, and let's say that you have two outdated versions. In the event that Java 8 32-bit started the installation first, when you append that command line, it will remove both the 32 and the 64-bit, and that's the way that Java's installer handles that switch for that remove older JREs. Now, the issue with that is in the event that that were to occur where you did have both versions, when the 64-bit update went to install, it will always check whether it's still applicable prior to the installation. And what will happen is since the 32-bit ran that command line that uninstalled the older 64-bit, it will then check in and say the update is no longer needed, therefore leaving the device with only one installation of Java. And that could potentially cause issues if you're using both 32 and 64-bit runtimes on an individual device. So we would only recommend using this option if you're absolutely sure that you don't have devices with both runtimes. So for example, you're either only running the 32-bit version of Java Runtime on 64-bit devices, or you're only running the 64-bit version of Java on 64-bit devices. If you're running them both, you're not going to want to go with this method. You would instead want to use the option to use that pre-action PowerShell script. So we'll wait for this to publish, and I'll explain how this could potentially cause an issue when we go to install it on the client side. All right, so we can now see that those updates have been published and they've also been deployed. So if we come over to our client and let's say that we want to install both of these updates, and in this case, we're actually going to simulate the issue that you might encounter in the event that you have both 32 and 64-bit. So I'm going to go ahead and say install all for my updates. So if we look in our CCM logs, we should see that patchmypc script runner log file appear here in a second. So here we go. So we can see that initially it looks like it decided to install the 32-bit version first. We can also see that we appended that command line to remove old JRE versions, like you would expect, since we added that to the command line. So what's going to happen in this scenario is we can see that we passed that to the main Java installer file directly for the update. So if we come and zoom out, we'll wait for this install to finish. And what we're going to notice here is that since it installed the 32-bit version, we will see that we do upgrade to the latest 32-bit version, which will be 8 update 211. But we're also going to notice that the 64-bit version got removed because that's the way Java's uninstaller handles that remove older JREs command line. Now, what would be nice is if the JRE installer would only uninstall previous builds of the architecture, and then what we could do, we could include this command line as a default within the update itself. But since it removes both architectures, we didn't want to include this natively because it could run into this issue where it removes both versions and you are only left with the version that installed. So if I refresh here, you can see that we did in fact have that situation where it uninstalled the 64-bit. Now, since the 64-bit was uninstalled, we can see that when the update actually went to install, it said, I'm actually now compliant and I don't need to install that latest installer for Java 8 update to 11 64-bit because it was no longer applicable. And that's why you would only want to use this option too if you're sure that you only use one architecture or version on all your devices. I hope this video was helpful and thank you for watching.